Mr. Patrizzi, can you call the roll?
Lori Kreninski,
Here.
Glenn McGrath,
Here.
Scott Fishel,
Here.
Tom Heck,
Here.
Jen Park.
Here. Okay, can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I make a motion to approve the appointment of Mike Patrizzi as the treasurer pro tempore. Can I get a second on that?
I'll second that.
Take your pick.
It's decision time.
Do we have any discussion?
So no problem. But I thought that if the treasurer was in here, it had to be somebody on the board.
No. We had that conversation.
We
I was
did,
like, I
so-
don't know, like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so the only reason I say that is in previous times, you have stood in.
Because we've not
We didn't
had
have an
a-
assistant
we didn't
treasurer.
have somebody else in the treasurer's.
And I guess that, it doesn't matter, we'll talk to Dan. But I thought that it was a situation where whoever was serving as treasurer actually had to be part of the board, had to be appointed by the board, or a member thereof. But anyway, I don't, we're not really, are we conducting any business tonight?
No.
Okay, so I don't think it matters, but maybe we can get
Well, we can
Dan's,
open Belinda tonight and,
I'm not gonna worry about it.
okay. Here. Well, we did.
Right.
Oh, we called the roll earlier, yeah.
We
Sorry.
just- We probably just need to square that away with Dan at some point. This is not, we're not approving things, that's good.
All right, so can you call the roll, please?
Lori Kreninski,
Aye.
Glenn McGrath,
I,
Scott Fishel, Tom Heck,
Aye.
Jen Park.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. All right, so that brings us to the topic of tonight's meeting, our facilities plan discussion.
Yes, we have from MD5 a representative, Orly Perez, who's been working on giving us some options to consider in terms of a second phase of a facility plan. We asked you here today to present those options to the board and also allow the board to ask any questions that they might have regarding those options.
Great. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Nice to see everyone again. Hi there. So what we will discuss today are the options that came out of the discussions and survey that everybody participated in. So just as a recap, we've all had discussions about what was really important, right, as part of this project. We all had individual conversations, some of you in here as well. And all of those ideas were put on paper, and let's make sure this is on. It is and was. I saw a blue light. No. Of course it is. Thank you. Appreciate that. So I've used the term conditions of satisfaction before, and we talked about that during our individual conversation. But for the team, conditions of satisfaction are explicit requirements by the client for a project in order to be successful. So I asked that question of you. What's a requirement in order for this to be successful? Right, we have a phase two, a new phase two, to look at options. And so we talked about 18 different things, right? Literally, there were 18 different things. So what we've done, and I'll walk through those 18 items, but we categorized them into 3 specific categories so that we could start to narrow down what you guys agreed on. Okay, let's just be real. We wanted to figure out what topics were most important and most agreed to by the majority. That's really where we needed to get to. So from a programmatic need standpoint, we asked if it was important to improve classroom size. We asked you if it was important to include vocational and training opportunities within the schools. Is it important if the construction schedule impacts the students in any way? We asked if it was important to reorganize the grade levels. We asked if a creative and performing arts program was important, and an upgrade to the athletic fields. This was actually a last-minute ad based on all of the independent, we asked an open-ended question, and there was a majority that made that comment. So we added that as a programmatic theme. Physical conditions, you'll see here, safety and security, an upgrade to aesthetics, right? We kind of talked about two different options of repairing or replacement. One would be an upgrade to aesthetics, and one would be significant repairs, which you'll see later on. Technology upgrades, is it important to you that part of this project we address technology upgrade needs? Space reallocation, some of us talked about the need to take a look at our current space, our existing space, and reallocate appropriately based on some of our changes. Significant repairs, as I mentioned, this would be more than just painting, windows, roof, right? This is significant aging of buildings, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and then field house improvements. We asked if it was important if we included that as part of the program. And lastly, in green, are our operational needs or goals. We talked about fiscal responsibility to the community, and if that was a deciding factor in this. We talked about financial sustainability as part of this, and what that looks like long-term is we're putting money into a building, are we pouring money into it as a Band-Aid, or are we building something new, right? That's kind of what we're talking about there. Advancement forward, does this second phase move the district towards where we're looking to go? Enrollment growth, have we taken that into account? Is it important that we take that into account as we look at all of our options? The bus and maintenance facility, and traffic and parking issues. So these are the 18 that came out of all of those discussions. Some of these may have been your issues. Some of these may not have even been part of our conversation. So what we did next was, this should look familiar. I'm sorry on the screen it is so small. But what we did next was we participated in an anonymous survey. And the survey results provided us with 5 top results. Right? So what we asked was, is it important to you for all those 18 items that we just discussed? And you could answer strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, somewhat agree, and strongly agree, right? So based on the results, we have 5 top results. Financial sustainability, safety and security, significant renovations, replacing the bus and maintenance facility, and reorganizing the grade levels. So let's kind of walk through those. Because what we want to do is we want to, as a team, make a decision based on what we now know the majority of the group feels is important, right? So
I'm sorry, when you say group, you're talking about everybody, you're not just talking about us, correct?
there were 14 as part of the group that were the core team that were provided to me as.
Okay, do you happen to have those, at least backgrounds of who?
Sure. So.
Us,
you,
right?
Yep. Dr. Kalis, Chuck, right? Rich, Melissa, Tana Ford, who else is in the room? Gary, obviously. I'd be happy to give you that list.
Okay.
It was the list that Gary and administration provided to me as key stakeholders, right? A teacher representation, a program student representation is part of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
So financial sustainability, are we thinking long-term, right? Financial sustainability is critical for the long-term success of this district. So we want to make efforts to move towards a budget that can be maintained for years to come. Make sure, again, that we're not pouring money into something that, will be a constant piggy bank breaking issue, right? Safety and security, a comprehensive approach to school safety. I think we all can agree that that is important. I know that the district is making current plans to making our buildings more secure and safer, so that will be part of a plan moving forward. Significant renovations. So we want to address the aging of school buildings, significant repairs, address those significant repairs while also developing long-term facility strategies, focusing on lean processes. How can we be most efficient, right? Allocating resources, putting our resources in the right spot. Replacing the bus and maintenance facility. What we've done here, and we'll talk through our options, the bus and maintenance facility has been designed, I'm air quoting, designed, for purposes of getting a cost estimate. So we've designed it to have 3 bus lifts for the 3 mechanics. We designed it to have a wash station. Beyond that, there's been no other programmatic design element. We did that for square footage so that we could get the cost of construction. So we'll take that into account as we move forward, but that's how that cost was obtained. And then lastly, grade level reorganization opportunity. We have, I believe that every conversation of mine included this topic. So 8th grade, moving that out of high school, that's part of all of our options. What you'll also see, we do have another option where we're reorganizing elementary as well. So K4, 5, 8, 9, 12. So, and that's one of our options as well. So today is really, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, we'll go through the options. Please ask your questions, how we got there, and then I imagine it's discussion. What should come out of this is obviously healthy conversation, but kind of next steps, and I'll maybe can allude to what next steps would look like as we walk through these options. Any questions before we get started with the options? No? Okay, cool. Option 1. Okay, so what you'll see, and this will be uniform across all of the slides, just so that we have clarity as we move forward. But across the top, you will see the name of the school. Notice that middle and elementary, where it says new, if it's not an option or it's not part of the option, we've written NA, but it is included as some other options, so we want to keep that consistent. And then down the left-hand side, you'll notice we've identified the enrollment for that school, the grade levels in which that school would serve, the square footage of that school, and then the cost. The cost is made up of several different factors. You do have a hard copy of the backup. So this is the Excel file. Obviously, this is all formulas. I'm happy to provide that if you want to kind of trace where the numbers are going. I just wanted you to have that on paper. But let's walk through this. So what we have done is we have identified that Riverside is really important to the community. And at a cost to renovate, $61,415,120. We've used that as our constant. So you will see this throughout all 5 options, okay? Our enrollment in Riverside would be 1,500 students. We would serve 9th through 12th grade. The square footage that we use there is almost all of the school, and we took these numbers as square footages that were taken from an assessment minus some of the ancillary spaces. So this is not, if you refer to the total square footage of the building, that's not it. But for the sake of a renovation cost and the factor, that's how we got that number based on the square footage. What would be included in this cost? That's probably the next question, right? Step 1. Before we can make any determination, we have to have a facility condition assessment, a unbiased third-party actual assessment of the building, identify the repairs that are needed, and then be able to prioritize them. The number in here accounts for infrastructure, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, air conditioning, all of those things we talked about, obviously allowing for some rooms to change in size. For $61 million, you'll be able to open some spaces and, you know, potentially have some vocational and training. Though that wasn't one of our top 5, it was one of the other, you know, conditions of satisfaction. So within this space, that's Riverside, right? So shall I pause there to answer any questions, or do we want to walk?
So are you doing, I haven't looked at your slides, are you doing a drill down into how you came up with the 61 million?
So that is this.
Okay.
Yep. And this is an Excel formula-based file. So what you'll
Okay.
see here probably has another
Are
26.
you going to walk us through this?
I can, sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
I can, actually what I'll do is I'll guide you through this first one, and then you'll be able to follow through. So if you're looking at this Excel spreadsheet, option 1, right up top. So what you'll notice if you find Riverside, so that would be your second line down. They've been filtered, obviously not according to this, but you'll notice here enrollment is 1,500, The square footage required per student is 165 square feet. With the Ohio School Design Manual requirements, we have existing square footage, we have required square footage, and that's if we build new, right? So we are not within OFCC requirements. If we're not building new, we're still under square foot, right?
And I think it's more like recommendations.
Absolutely. It's,
So, I mean,
however, any architect is going to go by the Ohio School Design Manual, right?
right, but that's,
For a new school.
I understand, but this, anyway, we'll have a discussion. Go ahead.
And so again, because this is a renovation, those requirements aren't, right? I know that recommendation is a word that's used. I'd like to say the requirements as you're building a new school. We're not doing that here. We're renovating, so we don't have to really follow that. Just in our data development and making those assumptions. If you notice next, you'll see middle school new. So that would be your first line, new middle school, enrollment of 1125, right? The square footage of 141 per student would then, we would build a 158,000 square foot building. Cost for new construction, probable cost from the OFCC based on 2022 numbers is $371.88 per square foot, and that's how we got that number.
Okay.
Okay?
But you don't have so you basically, if I'm understanding correctly, you took, here's our square footage, here's what the estimate is for renovation, here's the extended number. It isn't necessarily a breakdown of how much we're spending on windows or heating
Right,
systems
because
or,
we haven't done an assessment of the building, right? How can I tell you what it's gonna cost to replace a roof if I don't know how many square feet your roof, nobody's walked the roof, right? We can't, that is the next step. It has to be. In any of the options, the next step is to do an assessment of the building in which you wanna renovate. You don't have to do, obviously, all the buildings, right? You would do the building you'd wanna renovate, and then my suggestion, I know that this is for discussion, but that being the first step, you would then capture that information, be able to then prioritize that information, and, you know, then we really put a cost to it. So with a bucket of $61 million, NV5 is confident that you'd be able to address your MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, right? And structural infrastructure, so windows, roof. I mean, that number encompasses those.
so, and just to make sure I'm tracking what you said earlier, the square footage that we would come out with based on these parameters basically would be a square footage that is equivalent to what a new building would require. Did I pick that up correctly?
So when we are saying we're building new, then yes, we are using that recommended number. But when we're renovating, I'm not adding on square footage unless we want to. I haven't
Okay,
done that.
Okay, so
So if OFCC, so to that point, that's a great point. So the first one is renovated high school. If we went by the recommended square footage, we would need 247,500 square feet. We don't have that. I'm not recommending that we add on to the 236,000.
okay, all right, terrific.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make
Okay,
sure I
sure.
had it clear in my head. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
And there are times during these options where we are adding, I've noted the additional square footage in the existing square footage.
Terrific, thank you.
Perfect, yeah, absolutely. So middle school. So on this option one, you'll see building a new middle school. This would house 6th through 8th grade with 1,125 students. As we just spoke about, that 158,000 square feet, we talked about how we just calculated that, and that cost would be $59 million. The costs that we're talking about are today's costs, based on historical data from NV5, current construction costs and current construction projects. This does not include inflation, and this does not include any escalations of 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5% a year is typically what we see in the construction market. So the numbers that I'm telling you today, 6 months from now, are not necessarily the same numbers, right? We understand that part of the market.
Right. So I guess I certainly recognize inflation, and we have gone through a lot of things since we've done it, but we did build 2 elementary schools that combined have you know, 1,200 students,
Mhm.
again, elementary, not middle school, so there might be some square footage differences, but we built those basically for 38 million
Yep.
combined.
Yep,
So that 20, and that was just, you know, in 17,
yep,
so.
fair. That this is what it would cost today. We didn't make them up,
Yeah.
right? These are numbers, this is from our estimator. I wish that it was what you were hoping for, but this is the cost of construction.
So can I just interject something, because I want to make sure we're not putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, at least for the people at the table. That we're not so much looking at cost, we're looking at options of what we want the district to look like. And that, I think, should be the overriding factor. Like, what do we want this district to look like before we, do you know what I mean? Like,
That's an excellent
just-
point. To that point, these cost estimates are just that.
Estimates.
They are estimates based on the square footage. We were hired to come up with the options that would best suit your goals as a team. When we started this, we
Notwithstanding
didn't even
threats.
know what the goals were. Now, fiscal conservancy was a factor, right? We put that out there, and it honestly wasn't as important as I thought it was gonna be, to most of you. So,
Well,
it is just, I'm not saying not to all, right? But we
Right,
are a
well-
group, and the reason that we were brought here
Are you
is to
saying
find that
most or majority?
majority,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
And I understand everybody's
So-
gonna have,
and
right,
to-
a
to the-
different opinion, but to that point,
And to Mrs. Grassy's point, I hear you, and I definitely agree, but in determining what our best option is, there's, you know, you got, like, you're going for a contract, it's best value, right? It's not necessarily the lowest cost provider, it's not necessarily the highest cost provider, it's finding that best value. So that's, when I'm asking questions about how much things cost, I'm already there trying to,
Mhm.
in my mind, figure out what best value is.
Absolutely.
So that's, I don't want to get the cart in front of the horse, but that's how my mind works, and so, and hopefully some of the questions will illuminate for other people on the board as well.
yep. So, before you had mentioned the elementary schools that you built for, let's just round it to $20 million each, 18 million, 18 and a half. If you notice our next, Lamuth, we've converted to an elementary school. 87,000 square feet, it is not obviously currently 87,000, is it? It is, 87,366 square feet, and that costs to renovate and is 22 million. So, I understand that you built new for 18, but cost of construction,
We'll just have to, at some point, we'll have to get into that, because that just seems.
absolutely. I agree, that
That
is,
seems insane to me, actually. But we would have to spend $22 million to make in essence, a middle school adequate for an elementary. I'm not saying, I don't know.
with air conditioning, doing all the windows, the roofs, we're not saying just putting in smaller desks, right? This is a renovation of the entire building to convert it to a state-of-the-art elementary school to house K through 5 for
Okay.
750 students,
Gotcha.
right? Bring it up to par to the other 2 new schools that you have,
Okay.
okay? Next, you'll see as part of this plan, or last, I would say, Buckeye. So there was some discussion of Buckeye being used as a pre-K, maybe some offices, and so utilizing that space, potentially putting in some money. We put in a placeholder of $1 million. I don't even know if that's a required number, but just to show that there's a value in updating that school, right, and housing pre-K in that school. Okay? Part of every option that you will see at the bottom of the page, I'll start right to left. The new bus and maintenance facility that I mentioned earlier with the 3 bus bays, the wash station, that is the same number across the board. We've used that as a standing placeholder. Right above that number, that total cost for school construction is just the total cost of the schools, right? We wanted to make this almost like a menu, so you could say, well, this makes sense, but I don't necessarily want to do X, Y, or Z. And then the new athletic fields, we've priced out, estimated for 4 new athletic fields. Again, there's so many different factors that come into play when planning for this. So the cost, and I think you can, maybe I've taken out a detail, I'm happy to share with you. But there was a design cost, and a construction cost, and then obviously a contingency that we use. The new square footage of space, I thought that that might be an interesting number as you go across the board to understand how much new square footage are you getting with each option. And then what's the enrollment growth allowance? When we talk about the district growing, does this plan allow for that growth? And so with the plan in front of you, with the enrollment numbers and the square footage in front of you, this would allow for an 11% growth growing into that school. So you're not at capacity when you're opening it. Any other questions on option 1?
Yeah, none of these options for the high school renovation include any updates or upgrades to the performing arts, correct?
I don't want to be that
You don't know that.
specific.
You don't- or you
Yeah,
don't-
I don't know, I don't want to be that specific.
Okay.
Because that $61 million
I know it's part of the
bucket,
school, but
that $61 million bucket will be a prioritization. I don't know where the performing arts is going to land, but I imagine infrastructure, MEP, windows, roof, air conditioning, those are most likely, from a renovation standpoint, priorities. Now, we did discuss that $61 million allows wiggle room to move spaces, right? Open walls, shift things around. Obviously, getting an entire 8th grade out of the building, it's going to change the flow of the building as well. So there's a lot of room for change within that $61 million. Okay. Ready? Option 2. Oops. Option 2. Again, Riverside is going to be your constant across the board. We are not building a new middle school. We are going to renovate and put an addition onto Lamouth. It would house 1,125 students, grades 6 through 8, 158,000 square feet. So if you do look at the sheet, the existing square footage is 87,366. We would recommend adding 71,259. What we've done there is we've done 2 different estimates and added them together. So I'm happy again to share this in the formula version, but we've taken the square footage cost for new construction and added that for the square footage cost just for the renovation portion so that we could get the most accurate number possible. And so that's where you see that 49 million. For an elementary, we would be building new. It would have 770 students. You notice from option 1, it was 22 million to renovate for an elementary school. Here, it's 34 million to build a new elementary school. Buckeye, we would renovate and put an addition onto that to house extra elementary students. We know that we are at capacity, and I've heard that. So adding on to Buckeye, I believe we're starting at 30,000 square feet, 28,510, right? And we would be adding on 21,615, so a total of 50,125 for 16 million. Okay, this allows for 14.5% enrollment growth and 221,000 square feet, new square footage for the district.
So in regards to renovating or adding on to Buckeye, is there room on that property?
So that's a great question, also part of phase 2, but it would, based on our first pass, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for the square footage that we got. Any questions in option 2? And we'll move on. Option 3.
can I ask one more question?
Sure.
These costs for the athletic fields and the bus maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
are those included in these totals? Or
So.
is it separate?
So there's 2 numbers, so the athletic fields and the bus maintenance are separated out of the school intentionally. That
So it's-
160
so it's
is
the
not inclusive of,
Okay, so it's that and,
that's correct.
okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
sure.
Just
Can I-
making sure.
One other,
Please.
why are there different enrollment growth allowances?
So that's just based on the size of the school that we would be building.
Okay.
And if we have a larger school, larger capacity, allows for more room for growth. Option 3, here we have a grade shift. So in addition to 8th grade moving out of the high school, and we'll skip over Riverside because we talked about it already, but we would renovate and put an addition on, and we would make that a 5 through 8 So that 87,366 would get an additional 104,000 square feet for 192, right? And 61 million. Then K4, Buckeye, would be a 60,000 square foot building. So that would be a much larger addition, $20 million there, house K through 4. Melridge, that would be a pre-K housing, no extra additional square footage, and there's a $8 million price tag on that. Any discussion on shifting grades?
Yeah, so I this is more for Dr. Kalis. Are there many examples of schools that are 5 through 8?
There are some. I know, off the top of my head, I know Bay Village has 5 through 8, and Sure, they just,
did something like that.
I think they're 4-8 or 5-8.
I think they're 4-8.
I think they're 4-8.
Oh, they did, yeah.
What about the pods in the new schools? So moving 5th grade, like, would we be able to use those, you know, how we built with the pods, would we be able to use those creatively, like, if we were to move 5th grade out of the buildings? I'm just thinking, it's
Yeah.
a nice teaching structure, right? Like,
It
the way
is.
they are
We would
set
have
up.
to rethink it. I mean, clearly, you know, but there's certainly some creative things that we could do. You know what I mean? Maybe we have 2 grade levels and they could cross over, so you're doing intervention or providing gifted services. I mean, there's definitely some things that
The
we can
current
look at.
configuration is, there's 4 classrooms in each of the pods. When you're over Riverview, if you have a 5th section, you're not part of that grade level, it's not part of that pod. You have to come from somewhere else.
Right.
Which is usually what, in the kindergarten corridor.
I have a question for the board members. I've checked mine, I've actually taken the liberty to check Mr. Hack's. On option 3 at the bottom right-hand corner under Melridge in the last
It's-
column,
it's
I don't think we have the
misprinted.
7 million.
Correct. Mr. Patrizzi found that error from mine today.
Okay, so
So I made it changed
we should
on the
write that in.
screen. Yeah, sure, you can write that in, I'm happy to distribute that if you want afterwards.
Okay, so, okay.
But the total cost for construction is the same still.
That's correct, I
regardless
just
of
missed
ours
that
doesn't
last
have it.
Melridge,
Okay.
yep, that's 7,996,040. And the square footage, obviously, all those pieces.
Thank you.
Good catch.
But that's not a K-4 building, right? Or
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I was wondering.
that's just a pre-K building, right? Do you see where we have grade
Oh, then I
levels?
wrote K4 and pre-K, wow, everybody's finding all my mistakes today, let me double
Yeah,
check.
and
No, this is
I wasn't
good.
gonna say anything.
No,
until
this
you-
is great.
But that's right, we would
Option
just be
3.
using Melridge in this one as a pre-K building, correct?
No, K4, this is a K4.
Oh, okay.
But would it
Yeah.
include preschool too, or no?
We could, because
Okay.
if you think about it, if you're taking 5th grade out of the elementary, you're taking in essence 350 kids out. At Buckeye and Melridge, that's more than enough room.
Okay,
for
yeah, I
350.
just wanted to make, I
You know.
wasn't understanding how we were.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but, you know, we have 300 kids or so in those buildings. Yeah, we could put another few sections of preschool over there at Buckeye. Buckeye is great because it's all one floor too, for kids who might have disability.
You know, in this scenario, I'm assuming that Parkview and, no, Riverview and Parkside, excuse me, are K4 as well.
Correct.
So, and you're assuming there would be no transition costs to making that happen?
I am making that assumption, that's correct.
Which is probably reasonable, frankly,
Yeah.
but, okay, but just, you know, there are always.
Fair, no, yeah, good
Details.
point. Absolutely.
Tom, you're talking about the new buildings?
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't need that.
they could be transitioned without any
We
further
just have
modification.
More space.
for growth.
Okay. All right. Option 4. So this is, you know, it's the title, it's a renovate in addition to all. So we're renovating Riverside, we're not adding an addition. I think I got carried away by saying to all. We are renovating and adding an addition onto Lamuth, so an enrollment of 1125. This would be a 6 through 8, 158,000 square feet. You've seen this number before. Buckeye is a K5. We have an addition here, total square foot of 81,250 for 28 million, and then Melridge would also be a renovate and addition. So if we wanted to be able to fit all of the students in the buildings that we have, this would be the option in order to renovate and fit everybody into those buildings. Again, the renovation costs are estimates based on square footages and from an infrastructure MEP standpoint. Okay. Last but not least, we have the one that is different. So in this plan, I felt that it was important to resurrect, is that the word? A plan that, was kind of on the table before, just to throw it out there. But we would be building a new 6 through 12 campus. It would house 2,600 students. That number should be familiar to you. We would recommend 468,000 square feet. And today's costs would be, drum roll please, 176 million.
Are these cash prices, or do they account for any interest?
They do not account for any interest. These are just straight raw costs from our estimate. So the next you'll see converting Lamouth to an elementary school. And then lastly, we would renovate Buckeye, not add any additional square footage. And then decommission Melridge. We haven't talked about the decommissioning. If you haven't noticed on other pages, there's a decommissioning of Melridge. We haven't associated any costs or savings to that, just to say that. Right? We had discussed it, if there was a cost or a savings for decommissioning. I believe that there is savings to, keeping the old building up and running. You'll find some savings there, but once it maybe it's voided at the end, checks and balances. Okay, so last slide you will see, and I think this is probably a good place for me to pause for the discussion. This is the summary. Just to say, well, how do they compare against the others, and then that total cost. Again, that total cost does not include the athletic fields or the bus maintenance facility. These are just the school construction costs.
I find it interesting that our plan previously, without addressing the middle school and elementary schools and all that, we were adding about 186,000 square feet, which is pretty much in line with what you've got almost across the board, give or take. And we had an original cost of 145, right? This
3
looks
years
very
ago?
familiar to me, right? Like this is very familiar territory, so.
So I would make the observation, 2 observations. Number one, I have a project management background as well. I think renovating Riverside, boy, that really seems gold-plated to me, and it's really a gold-plated number. And number 2 is we did try to go down that path, and it was overwhelmingly rejected. So we got to figure out some sort of a middle ground where what was proposed versus where we're at, it's going to be different. It's definitely going to be different. But that 61 million really seems huge. Now we need to bring somebody in, but that seems huge.
It'd be great if we could do what we needed to for 40, right? But I'd rather tell you it's going to cost you 60.
Yeah, well, but again, it's all about what we decide to do. So one of the
Right.
analogies that I use, and you say that it's not really changing walls and things like that and square footage, but I guess we'll see. We'll save that for later. But that seems like, we definitely need to, the heating systems we need to look at, the roofing systems we need to look at, and then I'd be floored if it was in the realm of 61. I guess we'll find out. But the bottom line is that if it's that expensive, then we're going to have to really go in extended phases. And as I look at it, again, looking at best value, and I'm jumping the gun, but this is I don't think the voters would support a comprehensive all-in-one way forward. But we'll see.
If I may, before discussion, I guess, gets any livelier, you guys have been very quiet tonight, which is surprising, but my recommendation, what we need to do is we need to build trust with the community. And I think that we need to spend some of our own money before we ask for money. I think that that's the only way to get voters behind us. We know that that last levy failed miserably. 76% of the voters said no. We cannot put any of these numbers in front of the voters. That's my opinion. I think that if we spent time, energy, effort, money, it would be a shame to do that. I think what I would recommend is to look at which plan is most appealing and then be able to identify, we have some money, right? We know that we have some money. What are we able to do with the money that we have? I think the first step in order to identify that is that facility condition assessment, right? Understanding what the building truly needs. This isn't a walk through and take a look with the flashlight. Engineers through the building, measuring, looking through all of the systems. MEP specifically, right? Where we know we have corroded pipes. And I saw photos of what's in this building. So it's we've done a lot with the outside and the painting. It looks great, but there's a lot of infrastructure that needs work. So first step I suggest is facility condition assessment. We'll be able to see what the biggest needs are. And for that first bucket of $20 million, which we can make liquid, right? There could be priorities as part of that. That would be my recommendation. Right? And as you plan through that, you're then also simultaneously able to put together your plan to then put something on a ballot. That doesn't necessarily include this first. Right? You're making a good faith effort to the community to say, this is a plan we think will be most beneficial, whatever plan that is, right? And then say, well, we have X amount of money. And for X amount of money, we can do X, Y, and Z right now. Right? We can go out for bid, we'll get the facility condition assessment, we'll make up priorities, we'll go out for bid, we'll get those repairs done. While we're doing all of that, we can also actually put some plans together so that when you do go to the voters, you can have some conceptual. Right? It's hard to put, we know, we've done it before, it's hard to put something in front of the voters asking for money when they don't know what they're getting. Well, whilst renovating the high school, I'm just using that as an example for your first bucket of money, you could be putting together, spend some of your money that you have to put together conceptuals for the plan that you think is really best so that we can get that on a ballot and then get it passed.
Yeah,
Right? You're
so
kind of doing two things there.
What you're saying harkens back to about a year ago. Someone was saying that a year ago. And I really believe that's where we needed to start then, and that's really where we need to start. We're not going to get community support if we don't do our work first. And so we're a year later now, and we're back to the same conclusion. So it's interesting that you say that.
So I still have a couple concerns. One is we have a couple, I think, things that we really need to step up and take care of right now. I mean, our district is growing, and we're running out of space. I mean, the classrooms are tight. And we can renovate, and we can make plans to renovate, but I don't know that that's going to help us with our growing district. And I guess that's one of my main concerns is how do we up front start to make sure that we have room for our children. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So if you go back a year, that was addressed then, where we would add space. But we are now a year later and have accomplished nothing, and we're
so
back to a year ago what we were talking about. At
think
least
we would
what
be
I was
able-
talking about.
I don't think we would be able to add space immediately.
Correct.
We would not, right? However, I think we also have to know our audience, right?
Yes.
If we put something on the ballot that the voters don't approve, then you get nothing.
And I
right?
disagree.
So, when I make the recommendation to say, let's find something that the voters will find attractive, right? The community. However we spend that money. I don't think we'll be able to do that in the first phase by making space. Right? We're already in trailers, so the kids are already modular. But it does allow for you to then plan for any of the options and feel confident that you have the community behind you, right?
I think it's also very difficult. The other challenge I have, and guidance would be appreciated, is the fact that if we put new windows in the entire building and we decide to do some renovation, there's a possibility that that was throwaway work. And so again, I don't want to.
Totally, I wouldn't want to do that either. I think that that would be a poor judgment to
Correct.
just do something.
That's not responsible either.
Right,
Right.
first step,
So the way you do that is if you're gonna expand somewhere, you don't do the windows in that area, but you do the rest of them.
so what we would do first, and I know I keep harping on this facility condition assessment, but that's going to lay out everything that needs to be done. Then, once we prioritize, we would schedule appropriately, right? You're not going to paint after you've put in new carpet. You just wouldn't, right? You wouldn't do that in your home. You wouldn't put flooring in after you put the counters, set them down. So, we would prioritize once. And that wouldn't necessarily change that the windows wouldn't get done. Of course, they would get done just in the right order. So we wouldn't want to throw any money away. That would
Well,
be-
in terms of timeline, what are we looking at? For a building this large, I'm assuming that our main focus is going to be the high school.
Yeah.
I know we probably should do Duluth as well, right? If there's going to be any type of renovation there.
So I'll, just off the top of my head, I'll kind of talk through what the timeline would be for renovation. So, let's
Not only
just,
renovation, but I'm saying having an assessment done on what system.
right, that process, right, I'm sorry. So let's just say tomorrow you guys say, okay, we have money, let's go. First thing you would do is you would solicit bids, because we are public, you would solicit bids for facility condition assessment. It could help you write that scope of work, but that facility condition assessment should include detailed review of all MEP systems. That's a specialty when you get a facility condition assessment. That information probably takes 6 to 8 weeks to gather. It's a lot of work.
Is that for all 4 buildings?
I'm just talking one building at a time. The high school, let's just say we get money, right? Somebody says, okay, you got $20 million. We would, and we say we're doing the high school. Let's just say that that's the decision. So we would get the facility condition assessment. I would imagine it takes 6 to 8 weeks to receive that data back. As a team, we would then identify what they've discovered. They would make a recommendation of the priorities just based on requirement for repair. We would then go out for solicitation for I maybe suggest a design build firm. We can talk about CMR, construction manager at risk, but for a renovation, I think design build is nice and collaborative. You can bring the designer and the contractor in at the same time, so everybody's working together. It really does reduce a lot of change orders. It reduces a lot of field issues.
I'm
Yep.
going to assume it's more detailed than what we received through the OFCC back in 2008 and 2013. I mean, those are already old, right?
It will be, I imagine, significantly more detailed. Yeah, that was though it had a lot of data, it was still very high level. There wasn't any investigation, to my knowledge, right? No investigation into the systems.
Right,
So-
they do an overview with so
Yeah.
much per square foot and
Right.
say, here it is, it'll be enough.
Right, exactly. So the facility condition assessment will be very specific. Yes.
So I have a question. Why would we want to have all, like Riverside, Lamouth, Buckeye, and Melridge all assessed so that would help us then look at the overall costs of some of these options truly and put better real numbers to them and decide what's most important to us to move
And
forward
to her
first
point
with our
is,
dollars.
these buildings are going to, I mean, they're in almost every option here.
Mhm.
And to Tom's point too, in terms of cost.
I agree.
Makes sense.
Facility condition assessments can and should be done to all of the buildings that you're recommending. I was just using one
Well,
as
I'm
an
just
example.
asking, like, it's from my perspective, it would be better to have that knowledge going into making
I
a
agree.
decision rather than
I agree.
try and make a decision on which one of these options makes
Obviously, the high
sense.
school's going to drive most of the cost. I mean.
I agree.
But still.
Facility conditions assessments should be performed on all of the buildings that would be part of, and when I say all of the buildings, in some of the plans, Melridge isn't an option. So if we decide as a team that maybe there's an option you're not even comfortable with right now, I think that there might be like a good starting point to say, okay, maybe these 3 options make the most sense, and now we do a facility condition assessment on those buildings that are affected.
Are these companies, are they geared towards any type of facility, or are there ones that are more geared towards educational space?
So the firms that I have worked with are, I wouldn't say general, they have specialists that they would bring in. Surely I believe that we could find somebody specific to a school. I know that I've used Bach and Clark, they're south of here. They do facility conditions assessments for all commercial buildings nationwide, so I can ask them. I'm sure that, you know, that would be a resource that they would have.
And Jim, we had, well, I had Cleveland Construction out here, and they did some assessment. Nothing is written, nothing's formal, but did do some of that work, and it looks a little different than this.
So
I'll just put that on the table.
the other thing that just,
And they do schools.
the other thing that we want to be mindful of is that when a facility condition assessment is performed by an engineer, it's certified, right? They're certifying that that is the data that they found, so that when you then go design a building, it's not like a, oh, oops, I didn't realize that was there, right? Somebody is now accountable, liable, you know, to that risk. That's, we're asking a third party so that we don't have to assume anything. So I would just make the recommendation that that facility condition assessment is done by a third party, unbiased, and it should be done by a public solicitation. You will get the best results with the best data. And being public, you have to. So from a schedule, if I may, just go back from facility condition assessment, because you're public, everything does have to go through the bidding process. So based on your process, when you get things approved, and then once you advertise them, whatever that timeline is, right? You might have you have to advertise for 2 weeks and then allow 2 weeks. So whatever that looks like, that could be a 6 or 8 week process. We would then select either design build firm or an architect, depending on which delivery method we're going with. And then we go to the table with all of our ideas, from aesthetics to programming to, you know, what's important, really work through what a building could look like. And that's really where you need those 4 to 6 months before you get on a bond issue, right, before you get that on the ballot.
But that would, we would have those assessments, and somewhere in that process, we would be picking.
That's the first thing I would think,
But-
between 6 and 8 weeks you'd be able
But
to.
we would be picking some things after that.
Absolutely.
After we pick a plan or whatever, we would
Correct.
be picking some things to then undertake ourselves that would be incorporated. And
Correct.
they would be able to help us figure out what those things should be.
Well, their report would provide the priorities and the detailed priorities.
And what has to happen first, you can't do this out of order, right?
A schedule based on that, absolutely. Right, so in order to do, if you've decided to now pick, okay, well, they've identified these top 5 items, they all are in line with what we think we can afford within our first budget, right, then we would schedule that NB5. Would put a schedule together for those items of how that would work. Again, you would have to go out to publicly bid, so a schedule would be part of the RFP package when you're looking to hire a design build firm, right? So you give them as much information as possible, schedule being one of them, and we hope that we get the best firms, obviously, that come to the table, that you guys can collaborate with to get us the best product.
So I definitely agree that we need to get somebody in here to take a look.
Yeah,
And I think we have criticals, we're gonna have to prioritize,
Yeah.
because some things are critical and some things are optional.
right?
And I think that we are going to have to build credibility with the community. And so I don't think we should be thinking anywhere near term about anything on a bond and going to the voters. We gotta figure out what the situation is. I'm a little, I understand your point, Mrs. Grassi, about doing everything, but we've, you know, just less than 10 years ago, and maybe even sooner, I guess 15, so eight years ago, we did the Ohio Facilities Commission, and we're rejecting that. I don't want to get too far ahead, because I don't know how long the timeline is. It definitely is worth spending the money, but to do Riverside for sure. We can talk about the other buildings. I think that the problem we're going to have doing those other buildings is that by the time we address them, they could be aged. Those assessments could be aged, and aged, maybe is a better way of saying it, and not useful down the road. So But I, you know, as I laid out in my mind, is you gotta get that on the, you gotta understand that. The first thing is the assessment. And then I believe it would behoove us as a board to move forward as far as we can with the financial resources we have. And then say, look, we've been, you know, conceptually, here's what we've done. We've had X number of dollars, here's what we've done, and here's the next step we'd like to take. So that's, at least in my mind, how I would see potentially moving forward. But I definitely agree that, you know, the next stop is getting someone in here to take a look.
Oh, you saying just for Riverside?
I think just for Riverside, but whatever. If we want to do the other buildings as well, that's potentially fine. I am concerned that I personally do not see a large bond issue passing anytime soon. And then we have to intermix at some point, we're going to need an operational levy as well. I think that we need to be very strategic in our thinking about additional money that we would ask from the taxpayers.
I guess my concern with just approaching Riverside though is it still does not address our space needs.
So
That does not address the fact that our district is growing fast.
That is, as you heard Dr. Kalis say, and we are not breaking ground anytime soon. We're going to take new money for that.
I agree, but I think we got to figure out what that looks like. Because it's not a short, I mean, it's not a long-term goal, it's something that we gotta think about in the short term.
Well, then if we're talking short term, then we gotta figure out, are we putting more modular units in or something? That's short term. We're not, I don't believe that we are pouring foundation in the short term. So if we have a space issue, then we need to talk about other solutions.
Maybe we need to look at Lamuth too, and put it into the plan. If we need to add on to Lamuth to make that room, then, that's what I'm saying. I don't know that Riverside's the only school we can address right now.
Okay, that's fine. If you want to take a look at other scenarios, and there are multiple scenarios with Lamuth, right? There are multiple scenarios with with Buckeye, and there's a couple with Melridge as well. Although most of them say decommission. So we can do that, but I will tell you, from my perspective, that we are, even so, hypothetically the board comes to the conclusion, I don't think it's going to be this year, maybe it's next year that the board decides to move forward, and if it is passed, which who knows where we are, then I don't think we're not breaking ground until 2026 or 27, even if we were going that quick. So if we have issues today, we have to solve issues today, solve them with capabilities we have today, and we're not pouring foundation anytime soon.
Well, and I think to Lori's point though, is that if we're going to do a study of all of our facilities, they may come up with ideas to spend what resources that
They will not.
Not ideas, but they may prioritize where we need to be spending those dollars. If we're gonna ask them, hey, okay, now that we've done these assessments, what is the greatest need? Depending on which option we choose, it may not be to put money into the high school. I have no idea yet. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I will be able to make that assessment until they come back with their data. I get it that all of the plans say renovate the high school, because I think we can all agree that option 5, you know, is out of the question. But
The high school is in our future.
I get that. I understand that,
but then I guess I'm not understanding why you're saying why we would. So help me understand. Just hold on. Help me understand. You said something along the lines that the high school may not be in the future.
No, I did not say that.
Okay, I
So
misunderstood.
I get, what I'm saying is that we can all agree that renovate the high school is in all of these options with the exception of 5, and we've already determined that 5 probably isn't going to be the option, because that's what we put forth the last time and that didn't fly. So as far as I'm concerned, like for me, option 5 is off the table. So if we look at 1 through 4, yes, Riverside, renovations of Riverside are all, that's gonna happen, right, like as far as all these plans go, but if the building assessments come back and they say your greatest need right now, in any of these plans, we are addressing Lamuth as well, for example, they're all in there, either you add or you're renovating. Or convert, like.
And that's fair. So say we could move forward with Lamuth and get the 8th grade out.
Or something, right,
Along those
like
lines,
something.
to get the 8th grade out
Like what
without,
should we be addressing first?
without doing anything to Riverside. And that's
It's
a fair
option,
statement.
right.
That's a fair
So-
statement.
so I don't-
That's a fair strategy.
I don't feel like I want to say right this second that it's just all gonna get pumped into Riverside, because it may not, like, at the end of the day, right? And then
All
we
right.
could be addressing some space concerns, and then we continue
Take-
down
Taking a
that
look
path,
at,
right?
I agree, taking a look at the other buildings does make
We
sense.
could have
because
the
that could
same
be-
configuration that we have right now. I don't know if this is the best option. I don't think it probably is. But in terms of the most cost-effective, striking that balance is renovating Riverside, adding on to the middle school to get the 8th grade out, free some space up here for changing how we have instruction, some learning spaces that are more up to snuff that is compared to some newer schools around here, but also adding on to our new buildings. I mean, there is an ability to add on to another pod into the new elementary schools, adding on to Buckeye, and depending on what the enrollment looks like, I mean, maybe throw Melridge into the mix. Although it would be much better, I think, to decommission Melridge just because of its age and everything else. But
So I, just on this a little bit, so I've been, for those of you who may not care, I've been on the Buildings and Grounds almost all my time on the board. And, and I hear Mr. Arlesic say, when we look at the material conditions, Buckeye is worse, and Melridge, he likes Melridge. That's just based on what you said before. You hate Melridge. But
I'm basing it on, I'm basing it on the OFCC. When we looked at the assessment that they did, that Lamouth was, originally said, knock every building down in our district, keep Lamouth, and put up a $150 million bond. That was back when.
But $150 million is $150 million.
And after I left, I said, really, what do you really want us to do? Because that's not gonna fly. So that's why we had it in smaller chunks. But Lamouth was the best building, according to them, in best condition. And the next one was Buckeye, according to what they, I don't know if that's, you know.
You have to get Mr. Arlesic on the same page, because
Yeah.
we had more issues with Buckeye than
Yeah, Buckeye
Melridge
is-
in my
I mean,
recollection.
to me, it's better because it's ADA compatible, it's all, it's all on one floor, it's newer building.
I'm just ratchet.
Yeah, I know.
Whatever.
But, I mean,
I added some levity to this intense
It's-
conversation.
it's not like you'd want to put a new addition onto 2 new elementary schools, because that gives the impression that we didn't think about it, but
But
we
we
did. That's the thing. Originally, the OFCC said, put these buildings at 525, and I'm like, no, we're building at 650. And the way we have
Thank
it,
God we did that.
yeah, I mean, Riverview is pretty tight right now.
Yeah.
But there is some space, there's still the ability to build off the end of where the kindergarten pods are. I mean, we could do something like that. I don't know if it's the best idea. I would assume it's probably the most cost effective. How much is a 4 classroom pod gonna cost adding on to two new buildings?
I don't know, but before we break ground on anything or think about breaking ground, I mean, do we need to redistrict?
I don't think I think we're at the point where there's not a lot of movement. You look at the numbers right now and the classrooms that are available, he works magic, this guy, in terms of getting the kids in the right spaces. But we don't have a lot of wiggle room. You know, we got the preschool, we got it all, you know, out of the district. We have other structural spaces that 20 years ago we didn't have to provide, but now we do in terms of some special ed units. It's mandated. We don't have much of a choice, but we don't have. In fact, we were talking, and Cassie was asking if there's a possibility of possibly getting another modular unit or 2 over at Buckeye for next year.
I think if we have a short-term need, that is the solution. We are you know, 2 years, 3 years away from
Well,
anybody bringing a shovel in and digging a hole for a trench for the pouring foundation. I mean, so if we have issues now, we have to solve them with capabilities that we have now.
In terms of the additions, though, I mean, obviously Lamouth would be the bigger one. You'd have to get enough space for 350 kids. When you do that, though, you're going to need a bigger cafeteria. You're going to need a bigger music room, another music room possibly, or another gymnasium or bigger gymnasium. Because
Or
right now
possibly another cafeteria
Right.
instead of changing the one that's there, because that would be way too expensive.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if we have the capacity to serve that many kids, but not the space for them to sit, maybe we can build it on the other side of it where, you know, we can have one
So-
kitchen but 2 cafeterias.
So let me ask you, Jim, over the last 3 years, what has been the change in enrollment? What's the
To be
trend?
perfectly honest with you, every time we engage with the OFCC, we have to go through an enrollment.
Well, no, I
study.
mean, what is our actual enrollment the last 3
We've
years?
been pretty steady. We've been
Steady
pretty-
the last 3
We've been
years.
pretty steady the
So
last.
right now, the trend is steady,
Yes.
okay? And of the new construction, and there's a gentleman in here that know more about that than even I would, but of the new construction projects that are planned right now, I'm not so sure that they're ready to break ground, okay? And of the one I am aware of, they said they're gonna have to spread it out over 10 years because they don't have the infrastructure in the township to handle the growth. And so the amount of growth in students that we might have seems to me is gonna be a very slow, gradual growth, if at all. So the last 3 years, you're saying it's flat, and we're looking at 11% to 14% increase. That's a pretty rapid change. So then the question I have is, do we need that? And I'm gonna state that we're gonna have to know how much money we're gonna spend, okay? And that goes into, okay, what do we need and how much is it gonna cost? Understand that. But if we wanna go out and buy whatever it is, and it costs $100, and we only have $37, then we have to decide how much of that we're gonna buy, or are we gonna buy something different, or are we gonna do it over time? We have to figure out what the plan is. Right now, I think we're right back where we started from, and I think we need to have an idea of what we want. And I know that the ideal idea was, hey, just build everything new. Well, this is coming back to that. You can't even come close to that. So now what's realistic? I'll just put it out on the table, because I've put it out on the table before. If we add 4 to 6 classrooms at John R., that's if things stay the way they are. I mean, you could always put 8th grade over at Lamouth. 4 classrooms, 4 to 6 on Riverside. Add a pod, 4 to 6 at a couple elementary schools. Choose where you put them and what's the best investment there. Then you're doing windows, air conditioning, plumbing, lighting, and a number of other items. When you get into the ancillary items, you might be $1 million, $1.5 million, maybe $2 million if you go to the outside edge of that. And we have to figure out what we're gonna do, but we need to know how much money we're gonna spend. We already know the public's not gonna be up for it. I'll give a couple pieces of information in today's world. People that are stressed and don't have the money that they need to pay their bills, okay, right now are going to their 401ks and pulling out money just to pay their bills. The public is stressed. Last year, because of inflation, the average family lost about 90% of their purchasing power. When was the last time that happened? If anyone here knows when that was, I'll tell you, 1932. Okay? We're not looking at a good economic picture right now. I think we need to be very, very careful what we're doing. Very, very careful about how much money that we're going to tell people we want to spend. And I think it all comes back to, we have $20-some million that we can start with. I think we need to start doing some things so we can show the community that, number one, we're doing our job as a board, improving the buildings the way they need to be done, and that, of course, going along with a plan so we don't have to tear something apart, throw it away, and redo it and waste money as much as that could possibly be done. So anyway, that's my opinion.
So what I'm hearing, I haven't heard much from you, Jim, but what I'm hearing is that everybody agrees that the next step is a facility condition assessment to figure out what needs to be done so you can figure out how much money you need to spend.
And how to prioritize.
And how to prioritize. Right, once you prioritize, then as you get closer, you get into the scheduling of Saturday. So that would be then, the next step of that is, and you don't have to make the decision right now. You can request bids to be inclusive of all the schools, and when you see the cost, you can say, maybe we're gonna do all the schools and maybe we won't. I would suggest going out for bid to get a facility condition assessment for all the schools, then at least the bids come back and it's inclusive of everything, and you guys can then decide, right? You know, next steps there would be to write an RFP package, get that out on the street with as much detail as we can provide so that when we do get bids, they're providing us the best information, best numbers, right? Square footage, as much information as we know. And then, like I said, that's the process. They'll come in, coordinate with whomever, you know, and start that delivery. I would imagine within that bidding process, they'll also provide you the timeline. So I don't want you to use mine 6 to 8 weeks as the solid, but I imagine one school would be a 60.
I'm assuming we're talking about, would the board want us to do Melbridge as well, all of them?
I think we have to do all of them.
Yeah, I would, if for a penny and for a pound, at least we'd have all the information, we'd have to go back.
My biggest fear with not doing all of them is that we leave one school out and something.
That's it.
Well, and then that's a school that suddenly costs us some kind of crazy amount of money that we didn't even know.
Or we come up with a different thought, and all of a sudden, it's back on the table.
Right.
Right, so,
Okay.
so I think, I would say all.
We don't need to do anything like our maintenance department over on Ravenna Road if we're assuming eventually we might use our own money and leverage the PI levy to maybe do a bus garage in a maintenance area, right? We don't want to do that. We're not gonna, that's not in our future. That building's not in
You're
our
talking
future.
about,
Our
want to do a
maintenance-
facility
I would
condition.
agree with that, it's not in our future.
Yeah, its property's too small, and I suspect that our friends in Concord would not be so open to having something like that in the middle of their downtown.
You know, for all we know, they may come back and we may say, I don't know, rather than put our $20 million or whatever it is that we're determining that we're gonna spend into renovations currently, put it towards the building of a new elementary school. Do you know what I mean? Like we could come up with that as an option, you know, like in which
So the
which
facility condition
incorporates this
assessment
stuff,
is
right?
not going to provide you options.
No, it's not.
It's
It's
going to
gonna
provide
tell
you
you-
data, and then that data really is just a report. It's going to tell you what each building, the necessities of the building, not to make the technology better, not to change the space. I mean, purely from the building structural standpoint, you will get soup to nuts, MEP, structural, everything in there, but no options.
But that's when I think
But then
we'll
we
be
can
able
take
to
that.
figure out like what we do with our,
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
money and what need we want to address first
Mhm.
for ourselves. What is our biggest priority? If we decide space is a priority, maybe we are spending it differently than if we say, you know, adding some infrastructure improvements. I don't know, it'd be interesting to see what they come up with, cost-wise. I don't know.
So I'm assuming that, for lack of a better word, that's our marching orders right now, right? Is the,
Is
Put
to
something
bring
together.
bring some engineers in, or put an RFP to bring some engineers to take a look.
I think this will help us, once we see that, then we can start to say which one are we kind of gravitating towards, right, as a long-term plan?
Well, I would suggest if we choose any of these, the public is not gonna support it.
I would agree with
Hands
that,
down.
Scott. No, Scott, I agree completely. If you put one of these as is on paper,
And that's not what I'm
it's
saying,
not what
though.
we're doing.
That's
I
what I'm
agree.
saying.
I'm
I
not
agree.
saying that, I'm
Yeah.
saying it'll help us figure out how do we want to plan, how
Right.
do we want to march forward. I'm not saying, hey, public, we want
Yeah.
to
It
cover this
wasn't-
cost, that's
I
not
didn't
it.
hear as many criticisms about the plan more than I heard about the amount of it during that
Mhm.
campaign, so.
And we'll be smarter once really we have those actual numbers, right? Great. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, at this time, there's no, it's a discussion between the board, so we just, there's no
I
public
have some
participation.
questions that I
Well,
think might
maybe
provide some
after the board
context.
closes the
Right, as soon
meeting,
as we close the meeting, then
you can go
please.
ahead and dialogue.
Any other discussion on the plans with NV5? Everybody's good?
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. So that brings us to our next meeting announcements. So we have a board and special meeting work session February 9th at 6 PM. There's a Buildings and Grounds Operations Committee meeting February 13th at 7:30 AM. Board executive session February 13th at 9 AM. Finance and Audit and Personnel Committee meeting, February 16th at 8:15 a.m., and a business meeting, February 23rd at 7 p.m.
Are you sure?
It's on the paper.
It's on the, yeah, I gotta make sure.
I gotta make sure it's on my calendar. So make a motion to adjourn at 8:15 p.m.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fischler. Call roll, please.
Lori Krenisky.
Aye.
Lois Brazil.
Aye.
Aye.
John Hack.
Aye.
Mike Barr.
Aye.
And motion carried.
Orly, you'll be walking